So this is part 3 of our Fronoff diffraction module, and single slit diffraction, double slit diffraction, and we got an idea about what happens. We saw in single slit diffraction that if we imagine the slit to be made up of several points, imaginary points, then each point as if diffracts the light coming and falling on it, and then the result that we get on the screen is due to the superposition of all these diffracted lines. And we saw that we get a curve of the form of sine square beta by beta, where beta is called the diffraction parameter. And then when we did double slit diffraction, we saw that it was a combination of single slit diffraction and double slit interference. So the governing pattern was of interference, and the diffraction pattern was there as an envelope modulating the interference pattern. Okay, so today what we'll do is we will use the results that we have obtained in single slit diffraction and double slit diffraction to study the most general case of Fraunhofer diffraction, which is multiple slit diffraction. Okay, so Fraunhofer diffraction by multiple slits. This is what we are going to do today. All right, and this has, since multiple slit diffraction will lead us to the study of grating, so this is basically the most, I should say, I can't say most important, but I should say the most used form of diffraction. Okay, so this is what I mean by multiple slit diffraction. You see, earlier, the first time we did this, we had only one slit over here. Then we had two slits of width B. And now, as you can see, for this particular picture, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 slits. Okay, so more than 2 is when we will call it a multiple slit diffraction. And since it is Fraunhofer diffraction, so we have made arrangements such that the incoming rays are parallel, the rays that fall on the multiple slits, and then a particular parallel beam which have been diffracted at an angle of theta is made to fall on a convex lens, and we have kept the screen on the focal plane of this convex lens so that this particular beam of parallel rays are converged to a point P on the screen. And in this way, the different beams of parallel rays which are excuse me, which are diffracted at different values of theta will be likewise converged to different points on the screen, and depending on the value of theta, we'll see what the condition of maxima, minima, and what in general the intensity curve will be. Now, as usual, the width of each slit is B, like our earlier cases, and the separation between consecutive slits is A. So each slit here, is of width B, and the opaque space between the slits is given by A. All right, and once again, as our earlier assumption, each slit of width B consists of n imaginary sources delta distance apart. So we have not changed our assumption now that we have multiple slits. Even here, each slit of width B would still consist of n imaginary points which are delta distance apart. Now, separation between corresponding pairs of such sources in adjacent slits is given by D equal to A plus B. I explained this to you explicitly in the double slit discussion, where we saw that if we take a corresponding pair of such points in the two slits, then the separation between those two is given by D, which is equal to A plus B. So even in this case, A plus B will be denoted by D, and D is basically the separation between any two corresponding pair of such imaginary source in the given slits, in adjacent slits. Okay. Now the resulting field at any arbitrary point P on the screen will be the result of the superposition of capital N such terms where capital N is the total number of slits. So in this case here, we have 5 slits. So there will be 5 terms. Remember, in the double slit case, we had E1 coming from the first slit and E2 coming from the second slit. So here, along with E1 and E2, there will be E3, E4 and E5. So the resultant field at any point P will be the sum of 5 such terms. So if there are capital N number of slits, then the resultant field at the point P will be the result of the superposition of capital N number of such terms. All right. Now, field due to the first slit is, we know from our single slit diffraction result, is A sine beta by beta cos omega t minus beta. Okay, where we have to recall that beta equal to pi b by lambda sine theta, and we call this our diffraction parameter. From the second slit, if we consider the field to be E2, then this will be A sine beta by beta cos of omega t minus beta minus phi prime. Remember, till here it's like our what we have already done in our double slit diffraction discussion. Remember, the field from the second slit was at a phase phi prime behind the field from the first slit, because each point in the second slit would emit a ray which lagged behind the first slit by a phase phi prime. So the entire beam diffracted at an angle theta from the second slit would lag behind the entire beam diffracted at an angle theta from the first slit by a phase given by phi prime, where again we recall that phi prime equal to 2 pi by lambda d sine theta. And this is why I repeatedly told you that in order to do the multiple slit diffraction, you need to thoroughly go through your single slit and double slit diffraction discussions, because those are the two primary results that we will use in the discussion of multiple slit diffraction. Now, in the same manner, the field from the third slit, this will be E3, is A sine beta by beta cos omega t minus beta minus 2 phi prime, because the field from the third slit lags behind the field from the second slit by phi prime. So it will lag behind the field from the first slit by 2 phi prime. And I am sure you can find some similarity of this this trend that we are following with the norm that we followed in solving, in analyzing the superposition in our single slit diffraction case. So in this manner, if you write down the field due to each of the n slits, we will get for the nth slit, again this will be E capital N will be A sine beta by beta cos omega t minus beta minus capital N minus 1 phi prime. Okay, so exactly the prescription that we followed for our single slit, only there the fields were due to the light diffracted by each point on a single slit. Here these are beams coming out from each slit out of the capital N total number of slits that we have. So as I told you, the resultant field at the point P will be given by the sum of n such terms, and as in the case of single slit diffraction, we'll once again use the method of induction of summing n cosine terms, and the result that we get is this. A sine beta by beta is of course common, you take it out, and inside you get sine n phi prime by 2 by sine phi prime by 2 cosine of omega t minus beta minus n minus 1 by 2 phi prime. Okay, so this is the result. And we are not interested in this term. We are interested in the amplitude because it is the amplitude that will decide the intensity. So as we can see that the term is given by, the resultant field is given by a sine beta by beta sine n gamma by sine gamma cosine of omega t minus beta minus n minus 1 by 2 phi prime by phi prime, where what is gamma? Again, term taken from the double slit diffraction case. Gamma is phi prime by 2 equal to pi d by lambda sine theta, and again this is called the interference parameter. So beta pi b by lambda sine theta is called the diffraction parameter, and gamma pi d by lambda sine theta is called the interference parameter. Okay, so the multiple slit just a minute. Okay, as you can see that if this is the field, the final value of the field, then this term in front is the amplitude and square of this will be the intensity. Okay, so the intensity will be given by a square sine square beta by beta square sine square n gamma by sine square gamma. So multiple slit interference expression is I equal to I0, where I0 is as usual a square sine square beta by beta square sine square n gamma by sine square gamma. So typically the intensity is a product of two terms, and we can see that these two terms are sine square beta by beta square and sine square n gamma by sine square gamma. Now what does the sine square beta by beta square term represent? If you can recall from your double slit and single slit interference results, this represents the single slit diffraction term. The single slit intensity expression is given by I naught sine square beta by beta square. So here the first term sine square beta by beta square is the single slit diffraction term. Now when we did the double slit diffraction, we saw that the other term contributing to the intensity was the double slit interference. Here we have the multiple slit interference term. So here we have n slits, so light coming from n slits are getting superposed at the point P. So basically we are dealing with capital N number of slits where we are encountering for the first time multiple slit interference. So the intensity will be governed by two terms, single slit diffraction term and multiple slit interference term. Now you will find a lot of familiarity, of course, with what we did in the double slit diffraction case. Now before that, let us check what this term gives us when n is equal to 1. See, when n is equal to 1, we have I equal to I0 sine square beta by beta square, which is nothing but the single slit diffraction intensity. When n is equal to 2, what do we get? I naught sine square beta by beta square sine square 2 gamma by sine square gamma, and using your simple trigonometry, we get this to be 4 I naught sine square beta by beta square cos square gamma, where I'm sure all of you can recognize this is the double slit diffraction intensity. So what we are trying to show is that the multiple slit intensity expression is the most general intensity expression for Fraunhofer diffraction, and if you have this expression in hand, then you can just put the value of capital N, the number of slits, and you can get the intensity for any number of slits from this expression. So whatever be the number of slits, if you are dealing with Fraunhofer diffraction, you simply have to use this expression of intensity. So if you put n equal to 1, you'll get single slit diffraction term, n equal to 2, you'll get double slit diffraction term, and putting n equal to 3, 4, 5, etc. up to whatever value you want, you will get the desired intensity expression for that particular number of slits. So remember, this is a very, very important expression, being the most general expression for Fraunhofer diffraction pattern. Okay. Now let us analyze this particular expression, that is the intensity expression for multiple slit diffraction. So as usual, we'll find out the positions of maxima and minima, and we keep the value of I by a side because we'll need to use this several times. So I equal to this, we have already derived it. Now condition 1 is what will give us something called principal maxima. Now in double slit, remember, we had only one central maximum. We called it the central maximum. And when we went to higher orders, we got secondary maxima, which had intensities very less compared to the intensity of the central maxima. That is what we got for single slit. And we saw that in double slit, this just this was present just as a modulating factor. Okay. Now let us see what happens in the multiple slit case. So you see, if you put gamma equal to m pi in this expression, what will happen? We'll find that sine square n gamma by sine square gamma becomes 0 by 0. If you put gamma equal to m pi, m equal to any integer, we'll get any integer including 0, we'll get the ratio sine square n gamma by sine square gamma equal to 0 by 0, which we know is undetermined. So what do we do? Anyone, what do we do under these circumstances?
Either we can expand this into Taylor expansion, or we can use L'Hopital rule to do that.
Yes, since we have 0 by 0, so the best way is to call upon our savior, which is L'Hopital's rule. And using L'Hopital's rule, setting limit gamma tends to m pi, you see sine n gamma by sine gamma becomes n cos n gamma by cos gamma. So at gamma equal to n pi, cos n gamma by cos gamma becomes 1. So we get plus or minus n, because it's m pi, so cosine will be plus or minus 1. So the result is plus or minus n. So you see, at gamma equal to m pi, the equation of intensity I becomes n squared. Sine n gamma by sine gamma becomes plus minus n. So sine square n gamma by sine square gamma will become n squared. So we get the intensity as n square I naught sine square beta by beta square. All right. Now I therefore is proportional to square of the number of slits. You understand that this is giving us highly intense fringes. So if n is, say, when n is 2, we know it is 4. When n is, say, 5 or 10, say n is 10, we get fringes at these positions, gamma equal to m pi, we get fringes which are 100 times more, 100 times the value of the incident intensity. And we'll see later on that typically the value of n for multiple slits is 1000 or more. So you can understand how intense the fringes will be at these positions. So these are called the principal maxima. And you can see clearly that there is not one central maximum. There are several such maxima where the value of intensity is of the order of n square. And where are these positioned? These are positioned at gamma equal to m pi, m equal to any integer. So these principal maxima are positioned at gamma equal to m pi, m equal to 0, 1, 2, 3, etc., where gamma is pi d by lambda sine theta, remember, and therefore putting the value of gamma, we get pi d by sine lambda sine theta equal to m pi, so that d sine theta equal to m lambda. This is the position that will give you the principal maximum for a given order m, and putting the different values of m, you will see that there are several such positions where you will get the principal maxima. So when you have multiple slit diffraction, you get not one central maximum but several such principal maxima for the orders given by m equal to 0, 1, 2, 3, etc. Of course, we have to remember that sine theta cannot exceed 1. Modulus of sine theta has to be lesser than equal to 1, which gives us that m cannot be greater than d by lambda, right? If you put it over here, sine theta equal to m lambda by d. So if m becomes greater than d by lambda, then this becomes greater than 1, which is not possible. So because of the restrictions of the value of sine theta, m cannot exceed d by lambda, which means that there is a limit to the number of principal maxima. Although theoretically or mathematically, there is no limit to the number of principal maxima a particular system can have. M can be any integer, and you can go on till any high value of m and you will get that order of principal maxima. But because of technical reasons, because sine theta has to be less than equal to 1, m cannot exceed the value of d by lambda for a given setup, so that there is a limitation of the number of principal maxima that you may get. Okay, so this is the concept of principal maxima. Where do we get the principal maxima? At gamma equal to m pi, meaning at all the positions of theta, all the rays that are diffracted at an angle theta, which satisfies the relation d sine theta equal to m lambda, m being any integer. Okay, so all these positions are those where the principal maxima are present. All right. Next, minima and secondary maxima. Now, minima means, we know since it's a product term, so minima means I equal to 0, intensity 0, and this is possible either when sine squared beta by beta squared equal to 0 or when sine n gamma equal to 0. Now, sine squared beta by beta equal to 0, we know is given by beta equal to m pi. Putting the value of beta, you see this is the condition, b sine theta equal to m lambda. So this is the condition of diffraction minima, and as in the case of single slit and double slit, all the positions at which d sine theta equal to m lambda, that is all the positions at which the condition of diffraction minima are satisfied, we would get a dark line for the intensity pattern. All right. On the other hand, sine n gamma equal to 0 means n gamma equal to p pi, which means if you put the value of gamma, we have n d sine theta equal to plus or minus p lambda, p equal to 1, 2, 3, etc. All right. These are called the positions of secondary minima, and we will see in the next slide that P cannot take these values 0, n, 2n, 3n, etc. For the time being, just remember this, that the intensity is 0, either it's an either or condition, either if sine square beta by beta square equal to 0, giving the positions of the diffraction minima, or if sine n gamma equal to 0, giving the positions of what we will be calling the secondary minima. And or both these conditions will give us the positions of minima of the intensity pattern. Now, let us talk a little bit more about these secondary minima. See, secondary, why are we calling these secondary minima? Now we saw that secondary minima are the positions when sine n gamma equal to 0, which means n gamma equal to p pi, so that putting the value of gamma, you get n d sine theta equal to p lambda, and p can be any integer. Now ideally p can be any integer 0, 1, 2, 3, etc. You must be noticing over here that I have carefully avoided 0, and I will carefully avoid some more values of p, and you'll get to see why I am avoiding those values of p. This gives sine n gamma equal to 0, which means I equal to 0. So these are the positions where the intensity will be 0 and we will get dark lines. Now, we have to keep in mind that P, although an integer, cannot take the values 0, capital N, twice capital N, thrice capital N, etc. That is, P cannot take the value of an integral multiple of capital N. It cannot take the value of the integral multiple of the number of slits that are present in a given setup. Why? See, n gamma equal to p pi means gamma equal to p by n pi, right? So at p equal to 0, what will happen? Gamma equal to 0, which means sine n gamma by sine gamma equal to 0 by 0. But we already discussed that when we reach this condition of 0 by 0, we'll apply L'Hopital's rule and we'll get the intensity proportional to n square, which is the condition of principal maxima, right? Again, if you put p equal to capital N, nothing happens when p equal to 1 or 2 or 3, etc. But when you put p equal to capital N, gamma becomes equal to, see from this expression, p equal to capital N makes gamma equal to pi. So once again, sine n pi by sine pi is 0 by 0, again giving us the condition of principal maxima. And in this manner, if p equal to twice n, gamma equal to 2 pi, again sine n gamma by sine gamma gives sine n 2n pi by sine 2 pi, again 0 by 0, condition of principal maxima. So you can see clearly that when p is an integral multiple of capital N, the number of slits present in the system, it gives us the condition of principal maxima instead of giving us the condition of minima. Okay, and so on up to any integral multiple of capital N. Therefore, these values p equal to 0, n, 2n, 3n indicate the positions of the principal maxima. Therefore, p can mathematically have all these values 0, 1, 2, 3, etc. up to n, then n plus 1, n plus 2, etc. up to 2n, 2n plus 1, 2n plus 2, etc. up to 3n, and so on. Mathematically, all these integers are possible. But in this case of diffraction, Since p equal to 0 or any integral multiple gives me back the condition of principal maxima, therefore from the condition of minima n gamma equal to p pi, we must omit the values of p equal to 0, n, 2n, 3n, and so on. All right. So you can see clearly now that between any two principal maxima, there are n minus 1 number of secondary minima. See principal maxima, please carefully everyone pay attention over here. Principal maxima at 0, principal maxima at n. In between, these are the positions of minima. How many minima? 1, 2, 3, etc. up to n minus 1. Again, principal maxima at n, principal maxima at 2n. In between, how many? N plus 1, n plus 2, etc. up to 2n minus 1. So again, n minus 1. All right, principal maxima at 2n, principal maxima at 3n. So in between, how many minima? 2n plus 1, 2n plus 2 up to 3n minus 1. So again, n minus 1. So in between any two principal maxima, there will be n minus 1 number of secondary minima. All right. So if you have, say, a slit system containing, suppose, say, 6 openings, 6 slits, then how many minima will be there between two consecutive principal maxima? 6 minus 1, 5. Between any two principal maxima, there will be 5 such secondary minima. All right. Is this clear to everybody? Because this is a little bit confusing, and students often get a little confused in this part, what values of p to take and why this is happening. Please make sure that this is completely transparent to you. I want to make sure that all of you have understood this portion. Is it all right? Should I continue?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. If you go back, after the class is over, if you go back and find any confusion while going through this portion, then please don't hesitate to call me or WhatsApp me. I'll be happy to explain it once again. Okay. Now, so these are the secondary minima. Now we have to remember that just now we found out that between any two principal maxima, there are n minus 1 secondary minima. That is n minus 1 dark line. We are calling them secondary minima, but basically they are dark lines. We'll see soon why we are calling them secondary minima. Now, you have to realize that the presence of two consecutive minima, that is dark lines, will be observed only if there is a maxima separating them, right? Suppose I tell you that here there are two dark lines. Will you be able to, will you believe me? Will you be able to distinguish the two dark lines? But I claim that there are two dark lines over here. Is it possible for any of us to distinguish that there are two dark lines over here? Of course, no. You can just tell me, no ma'am, we can clearly see that there is a single dark patch. There are no, how can you say there are two dark lines? We can say there are two dark lines only if there is a bright line in between them, separating them, right? Similarly with bright lines, if I say there are two bright lines, then there must be a dark line in between separating them. If there are two dark lines, there must be a bright line in between to separate them. All right. Why I am saying all this? I am saying all this that since I am claiming that there are n minus 1 minima between two principal maxima, how will you distinguish these n minus 1 minima. Just as I told you right now that if we have a system containing 6 slits, then between two principal maxima there will be 5 minima. How will you decide that there are 5 minima? You will only be able to say that there are 5 minima if there exists 4 maxima between them. You will be able to say that there are 5 dark lines only if there also exist 4 bright lines separating the 5 dark lines. So between the n minus 1 secondary maxima, there must exist, secondary minima, this will be secondary minima, there must exist, just a second, I'll just change this because okay. So in between the n minus 1 secondary minima, there must exist n minus 2 maxima. Okay. These are called the secondary maxima. Okay. And we'll see whether these have the intensity same as the principal maxima or less, or what are the intensities at the positions of these secondary maxima. Now again we recall that the value of intensity is given by I naught sine square beta by beta square sine square n gamma by sine square gamma, and we recall that B is much less than D because D is equal to A plus B, A is greater than B, so typically B is much less than D. And like we argued in the case of double slit diffraction also, that since B is much smaller than D, therefore the term containing B, that is beta pi B by lambda sine theta, must be varying much more slowly than the term containing D, that is gamma pi D by lambda sine theta. So the sine squared beta by, and here it not only has sine square gamma, it also has sine square n gamma, where n is a large number. So you can jolly well understand that the variation of this term is almost negligible compared to the speed of variation of this term. So this term changes way faster than this term. All right. So sine square beta by beta square is the slowly varying diffraction term, whereas sine square n gamma by sine square gamma is the term that will be deciding the secondary maxima. Okay. And for convenience, we call this term sine square n gamma by sine square gamma as I prime, the intensity of the secondary maximum. All right. Now, if you take the derivative of I prime with respect to gamma, this is what you get. 2 sine square n gamma by sine square gamma into n cot n gamma minus cot gamma equal to 0. Now, we have already dealt with this sine square n gamma by sine square gamma. If gamma equal to m pi, we get the principal maxima, and if gamma equal to p pi, where p not equal to an integral multiple of capital N, then we get the secondary minima. So we have already discussed this term in detail. Therefore, n cot n gamma minus cot gamma equal to 0 will be giving me the values of the secondary maxima intensity at the secondary maxima. And we get this result, I secondary maxima, typically equal to I principal maxima. PM stands for principal maxima, SM stands for secondary maxima, divided by 1 plus n square sine square gamma. So you can see n is a very large number and it appears in the denominator. So you can clearly say from this expression that intensity of secondary maxima are extremely feeble. Okay, it's 1 by n square times intensity of the principal maxima, and n is very, very large, so 1 by n square times the intensity makes the values of I secondary maxima extremely feeble. So we just found that out, and for your reference I have done this sort of, what should I say, trigonometry or algebra, where from the expression n cot n gamma equal minus cot gamma equal to 0, we arrive at this result that I prime or I secondary maxima is much, much less than I principal maxima. There is nothing much to this, so I won't just read line by line these steps of this derivation. I've done this, so you can go through it and understand how we have got this result. We are interested in this result, which shows that the intensity of the secondary maxima are way smaller than the intensity of the principal maxima. Okay. So now we are at a position to decide what the intensity distribution for the multiple slit diffraction will look like. We have the principal maxima at gamma equal to m pi, m equal to 0, 1, 2, 3, etc., giving us d sine theta equal to m lambda, the positions of the principal maxima. We have the secondary minima at gamma equal to p by capital N pi, where p equal to 1, 2, 3, but p not equal to 0, n, 2n, 3n, etc. Repeatedly I am telling you this, so that it gets into your head. And these give us the positions of I equal to 0, the secondary minima. And then we have the secondary maxima given by the relation n cot n gamma minus cot gamma equal to 0. So this is the typical figure of intensity distribution that we'll get. These peaks, m squared, and these small peaks, these, and in between the points where the intensities are 0. Okay, so these peaks of the order of n square are the positions of the principal maxima at d sine theta equal to m lambda. These I have indicated by the arrows, the positions at which I become 0. Those are the positions of the secondary minima, and these small peaks, very, very small peaks, very, very small compared to these high peaks of the principal maxima. These are the secondary maxima satisfying the relation n cot n gamma minus cot gamma equal to 0. All right. Now we must not forget, of course, our single slit diffraction minima and maxima governed by the sine square beta by beta square term, and we must remember that this will always be present as an envelope. So this is the final pattern that we have. Okay, this is the pattern of the central region where we have not considered the single slit diffraction term. But if the single slit diffraction is considered, then we have this sine square beta by beta square. Then we have this sine square n gamma by sine square gamma. And finally, we have the product of the two, sine square beta by beta square into sine square n gamma by sine square gamma, where we can clearly see that the diffraction term basically modulates the interference term. Okay, so in general, if the diffraction term is so slow, if beta is so small, that is in turn if the slits are so narrow that beta is very, very small and sine square beta by beta square is extremely slow, then it's the central region that will cover most of our field of view, and we'll be able to get to see something like this. All right. So final pattern is multiple slit interference modulated by single slit diffraction. All right. Now, there are certain points that we need to keep in mind in relation to multiple slit diffraction. What are they? Intensity of higher order principal maxima will be modified due to the presence of the diffraction pattern envelope. You see, these are also principal maxima, but since the diffraction envelope is present and we know that the secondary maxima of the single slit diffraction envelope have intensities which are much lower than the central maxima, therefore the peaks of the principal maxima which fall within the secondary maxima of the diffraction envelope become considerably smaller than their other counterparts having intensity proportional to n square. Right? Now, if we take, for example, n equal to 6, the intensity of the central principal maxima is of the order of n square, that is 36. Number of minima between two consecutive principal maxima is n minus 1, 5. Number of secondary maxima between two principal maxima is n minus 2 equal to 4. For a given angle, if principal maxima coincides with the diffraction minima, then it will be absent and this will result in missing orders. We discussed missing orders in detail for our double slit diffraction case, and in the same manner missing orders will be present here too, because if for a particular, say, principal maxima, if that coincides with the diffraction minima present at that very position, then the position of the dark line for the diffraction minima will obliterate the bright line for the principal maxima, and that will be not present in our final intensity result, and therefore it will be called a missing order. Now, in addition to the secondary minima, diffraction minima are also there, but for large n, we know that they will hardly contribute at the higher orders. Now, for a given order m, principal maxima are at d sine theta m equal to m lambda, right? And we also saw that the minima occur at d sine theta equal to plus or minus p by n lambda, where p equal to 1 to 3, p not equal to 0 to n to n, 3n, etc. Now, suppose, please follow this very, very carefully. Theta m is the angle at which the maxima, principal maximum is formed. Now, suppose theta plus or minus delta theta m are the angles of diffraction at the first minima on either side of the principal maxima. Okay, so what am I talking about? Let me go back to this slide. Okay, so this is theta m. So this, let us say this is theta m, all right, for a particular order principal maximum. So first minima occurs here. So let us call this first minima angle to be theta m plus delta theta m. Or if you go on this side, it will be theta m minus delta theta m. All right. So all right. So theta m plus delta theta plus or minus delta theta m is angle of diffraction at first minima on either side of the principal maxima, because we know minima occur at d sine theta plus or minus p by n lambda. Okay, position of first minima is given by p equal to 1. You put p equal to 1, so it becomes d sine theta equal to 1 by n lambda. So in this expression over here, we can write d sine theta m plus or minus delta theta m is equal to m lambda plus or minus lambda by n. M lambda is position of maxima If you go on either side, you have to travel a distance of lambda by n in order to reach the first minima. So if you now, solve this equation, what you'll get is delta theta m equal to lambda by n d cos theta m. What have we used? We have used over here delta theta m very small, so that we replace cos theta m by 1 and sin delta theta m by delta theta m. And we have also used the fact that d sin theta equal to m lambda, so that we can cross out these two terms. So what we see is that delta theta is equal to lambda by n d cos theta m. Now very carefully look at this term. With increasing n, if you increase the number of slits, denominator increases on right hand side. So what will happen? The angular width will decrease. So higher the number of slits, smaller will be the angular width of your spec of the intensity pattern. So the principal maxima become sharper with increasing n. Okay, this is something that you have to keep in mind, and this also gives you a concept of the angular width of the intensity distribution. So this is typically what you see in the laboratory if you use different number of slits in the multiple slit diffraction setup. So this is a typical single slit, central maxima, secondary maxima, and minima in between. Intensity of secondary maxima way smaller than that of the central maxima. Two slits, remember, central maxima gets divided up into the intensity distribution of the interference pattern, and we have the secondary maxima also, which modulate the interference peaks at those positions. And then they have gone on to 3 slits, 4 slits, 5 slits, 7 slits, etc. Resolution is not very good, but this is typically how the pattern changes when you change the number of slits, and intensity is given by the general term, where you just have to change the value of capital N to get the intensity at that particular setup. Okay, so this completes our discussion on multiple slit diffraction. But with the knowledge of multiple slit diffraction, we will now move over to plane transmission grating. We now want to see the main application of whatever we have studied till now. Okay, single slit, double slit, multiple slit, boil down to the use of the plane transmission grating, which is a very well used apparatus in the field of optics. All right. Now let's see first what a plane transmission grating is. When you do your grating experiment in the laboratory, I hope all of you are with me. I have not taken a break and not asked you whether you are understanding or not. Just someone please unmute and say that you are.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay. So this is a plane transmission grating. So in the laboratory, when you go in and you ask Shomita grating ta batao, this is what you'll get. Okay. Typically size is half of your smartphone screen, even I think 1/3 of your smartphone screen size. In fact, the size that I have shown on the slide, this is the size that you get in reality. Okay, it's also written students grating, and you can see that clearly it looks like a plain glass slab. It is basically an optically transparent sheet on which slits are made by ruling grooves. What does that mean? So what is done is, in the factory, a sheet of transparent glass is taken, thin sheet of transparent glass, And with a diamond cutter, such lines are etched into the glass. Are there artists in this group? Artists do a lot of etching on glass. Or if you've done a project of glass painting in school, you must have done etching on a glass surface with something sharp. So exactly that is done over here. Using a sharp object, typically they use a diamond point. They etch grooves like this, okay, on the glass surface. Now, since this is a transparent material, the moment the grooves are etched, those positions of the grooves become opaque to light. All right. So these grooves act as the opaque spaces, and the space in between them form the transparent spaces that let the light pass through, and so these are the slits. So it is typically like this that a grating is made. Plain glass sheet on which straight lines are etched very close to each other. The moment this etching is done, the line that is etched on the glass, that becomes opaque to light, and the space in between, which was transparent earlier, remains transparent, so it allows the light to pass through. So these act as the slits. So you see, by etching a number of such opaque lines on the glass sheet, you get a number of transparent lines in between, and they are the ones that form the slits. Okay. Now, this is a staggering number, and this is what you should keep in mind. So when we were doing multiple slit diffraction, we were talking about n of the order of 6 and 5 and 10 and etc. 7. Okay. In a grating, typically n is of the order of 15,000 slits per inch. Can you imagine that? 15,000 slits per inch. So, like, the lines that I have drawn are way too magnified. It's not like this. They are much crowded together, and it is it's not like that you and I will take a transparent sheet of glass in hand and I will take something sharp and etch lines and a grating will be formed. No, it is machine made, and it has to be, formally manufactured, and typically, as you can see, the number of lines on such a grating is, in an inch there can be 15,000 slits. Okay, so it's a very, very large number, and the moment you see this n, you must recall that n gives you the value of the intensity of the principal maxima n square. So you can imagine how intense the principal maxima of a grating will be, n square. Okay, so that is what you should realize. So typically this is multiple slit diffraction. Now we got the result for multiple slit intensity, and we said that that is the general result. We just have to put the value of n and it will give us the intensity required. So we'll put this value of n and it will give us the intensity required. So typically multiple slit diffraction, all analytics, all theories that we have discussed for multiple slit diffraction also apply for a grating, because it is nothing but multiple slit diffraction where the number of slits is very, very high. So position of principal maxima will be given by d sine theta equal to m lambda. At least this I am sure of. It's multiple slit diffraction. Therefore, position of principal maxima will be decided by d sine theta equal to m lambda. This is called the grating equation. Often you take you write this as sine theta equal to m by d lambda, or sine theta equal to mn lambda, where n equal to 1 by d, and that is also called the grating equation. But this is in general the grating equation, which will give you the positions of the principal maxima. And d equal to a plus b is called the grating element. Okay, So if you are given a grating and said that this grating, this particular grating has a grating element of so and so, then you know that they are giving you the value of d equal to a plus b. Okay, and they will also give you the value of n for a particular grating. Okay, now let us see what the grating spectrum is. We do not use the grating in general for a monochromatic light. We do use, but the grating is mostly used to see not a single line, but the separation between two lines. So before moving on to that, let us see what a grating spectrum is and why do we at all discuss a grating spectrum. All right. Now, if you take a look at the grating equation d sine theta equal to m lambda, you see that for polychromatic incident light, if the incident light is not a single lambda but a composite light, then the value of theta will be different for different values of lambda, right? The same equation, if the light that is coming is composed of not one lambda but several lambdas, then the equation will be satisfied differently for the different lambdas. The value of theta will vary. Only at the central principal maximum, with m equal to 0, theta will be 0 irrespective of lambda. So whatever polychromatic light is incident, the central principal maximum will always be a white patch of light, because there all the rays are meeting in phase, and therefore whatever be the value of lambda, that patch of light will always remain white, because at that position theta equal to 0, m equal to 0 irrespective of lambda. Now, but for all other orders, other than m equal to 0, that is for all m not equal to 0, the component colors of the incident light will be diffracted at different angles, satisfying this relation d sine theta equal to m lambda, right? For higher orders, the colors will no longer satisfy d sine theta equal to m lambda together. They will be satisfying this relation in different manners. So they will be diffracted at different angles, satisfying this grating equation. So for a particular order, for a particular value of m, each lambda will have a different position of the principal maximum. Is this clear to everybody? Incident light is coming, central maxima, they are all meeting in phase, so they will all be satisfying d sine theta equal to m lambda, since m is 0, sine theta is 0. So everyone will come together, and when all the component lights fall on each other, we will get white light. But when you go to a higher order, m not equal to 0, so a particular lambda will satisfy d sine theta equal to n lambda for a particular value of theta. So for a given order, each lambda will have a different position of the principal maxima. So what will this result in? This will result in the appearance of spectra. This will result in the separation of the composite light, of the colors consisting the composite light, into separate entities. All right, and this is what we typically see. This is a grating spectrum or spectra. So you see m equal to 0, positioned at theta equal to 0, central maxima, white light, composite light, okay, all light falling together. But the moment you go to a higher order, you see, this is the first order principal maxima, but the different colors satisfy the condition of principal maxima separately. So they have been separated spectrum. This is the second order, third order, etc. So this is how When you use composite light in case of multiple slits, you get to see spectrum. Okay, is the appearance of spectrum clear to everybody using multiple slits? Why suddenly we are getting a spectra?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so now we will have some discussions related to this thing. First of all, just like double slit and multiple slit, here also there will be missing orders. And as you can understand that if some principal maxima for some given lambda coincide with the diffraction minima that is present there, then some lines from those orders will be absent from the pattern. Entire pattern, entire order will not be absent, but some colors will be absent because those positions have coincided with the position of the diffraction minima. So these are called the absent spectra. Okay. Suppose principal maximum of order m is d sine theta equal to m lambda, and this coincides with diffraction minimum of order n, b sine theta equal to n lambda for a given theta. Then you see d by b equal to m by n, and you get m by n equal to 1 plus a by b. So depending on the value of a and b, suppose a by b equal to 1, slit width and slit separation are the same, then m will be equal to 2n, and then 2, 4, 6, etc. orders will be absent. A by b equal to 2, m equal to 3n, and 3, 6, 9, etc. orders will be absent. So in this manner, you can predict which particular order will be absent. Usually, A by B ratio is not so small, it's large, and so the earlier orders are not usually absent. Then there is something else called ghost lines. Okay, these are just terms related to a grating spectrum. What are ghost lines? You see, sometimes on the screen it is seen when we are trying to observe a grating spectrum that a particular line has appeared, which when you try to uh, relate to this grating equation d sine theta equal to m lambda, does not give you a comprehensive result. What do I mean by that? Suppose you have seen a line at a particular value of theta, okay, at a particular order. So if you use this equation to find the order for that line that has appeared at an angle theta, it may give you a fractional value of m of the order, but fractional order doesn't make any sense. So basically, these faint lines that sometimes appear on the screen cannot be accounted for. Okay, they typically result due to some defective manufacturing. You can understand that in the factory, when a grating is manufactured mechanically, the machine is grooving on the glass plate, and a number of around 15,000 per inch is being etched. Mistakes happen, and it is due to such manufacturing defects that ghost lines appear. I've got a typical picture of a ghost line from the internet. You see, this is a what should I call it? A good grating where it has produced proper lines. But here, you see, this line here cannot be accounted for a given order. These faint lines here cannot be accounted for a given order. So they are called the ghost lines. They sometimes give you a say 1 mark or 2 mark question asking what is a ghost line. So it has to be there. You must just, the knowledge should be there what is a ghost line. Okay. The next thing that we are going to do is very, very important. Resolving power and how it is related to the nature of grating spectrum. We are almost at the far end of our multiple slit diffraction discussion, and resolving power is very, very important. Now, Now, what is resolving power? Suppose this is a dot, okay, black dot on white paper, and this is another dot. Now, can you see the two dots separately? Can you properly see two separate dots? We cannot, right? We cannot properly see these two dots to be separate because they are overlapping on each other. Even if there is a gap between the two, with our eyes, we cannot see the gap. Now, what do we do in such cases? We use a magnifying glass, right? And using the magnifying glass, we can sort of magnify the distance between the two dots and see the two dots as two separate entities, right? We know that with our eyes also we can, there is a figure of merit for any instrument, and similarly our eyes also have such a thing, and there is a minimum distance that should be there between two objects so that we can see them as separate objects. If two lines are closer than that minimum distance that is required, then we won't be able to see them as two separate entities. All right. So that gives us an idea of resolving power. What is resolving power? It is the ability to distinguish two very closely spaced objects. And it's a qualification for any optical instrument. Any optical instrument would be qualified by its resolving power. All of you use Android phones. Some of you might also use digital cameras. And we know we are always talking about resolution, right? When we talk about the camera, we talk about the resolution. Apart from the optical zoom, we also talk about the resolution of the camera. How far the camera, what were we talking about when we talk about pixels? Megapixel. What does it mean? That how much the camera can resolve, right? When you zoom in on a particular object, it becomes hazy, it doesn't remain focused. What happens? The resolution, if it is a not very highly resolving device, the resolution sort of, what should I say, becomes very, the resolution worsens when you zoom in, okay? So we'll not go into very deep discussion regarding that. We just need to have an idea what resolving power is. It is the ability to distinguish two closely spaced objects, okay? And when you are talking about resolution of spectral lines, then if the ability of an instrument to distinctly observe two closely spaced spectral lines, all right? Ability of an instrument to distinctly observe two closely spaced spectral lines. This will be spaced, not spaces. Just a second. All right. Now we know the grating equation is d sine theta equal to m lambda. All right. So if you differentiate, you get d cos theta delta theta equal to m delta lambda. So that we get delta theta by delta lambda equal to m by d cos theta. Now, for a given grating, the angular spread delta theta therefore increases for higher orders. Higher the value of m, greater will be delta theta for a given lambda and d. All right. So the lines will be more separated as you go towards the higher orders. And I think you have observed this see, if you see the picture, you see The lines are more closely spaced over here. They are separated for a higher order. They are more separated for an even higher order. So for a given setup, the spectral lines will be more widely spaced when you go to a higher order. Okay. Now such a spectrum is called a normal spectrum. For a given order, the ratio delta theta by delta lambda is a constant. If m is constant, that is for a given order, d of course is a constant of the system, then delta theta by delta lambda is a constant, because we've taken theta tends to 0, so cos theta equal to 1, and such a spectrum is called a normal spectrum. So we are dealing with a normal spectrum, which means that angular width between two spectral lines is directly proportional to the difference of their wavelengths. Greater the difference in wavelengths between two lines, greater will be the angular separation between them. So you can understand that for a normal spectrum, that is for a spectrum obtained from a grating, the lines are very clearly separated, right? Separation between Angle of separation between two lines will increase when wavelength difference between them increases. Also from this relation you see delta theta equal to 1 proportional to 1 by d, which means smaller the grating element, larger is the angular spread. Smaller the value of d, greater is the angular spread of the spectrum. Now with these things in mind, we now try to see what the resolving power of a grating is. See, this is the ability to distinguish two very close spectral lines, lambda and lambda plus delta lambda, where delta lambda is very, very small. So like suppose you want to see the sodium D lines as separate. What is the wavelength difference between sodium D lines? One is 5893 angstrom and the other is 5898 or 5899. So the difference is only about 6 angstroms. Can you imagine how small 6 angstroms is? And you want to see this difference using an instrument. So that is the power, the resolving power, that is the intricacy of an optical instrument, that it can show you a separation of even 6 angstrom. 6 angstrom means 6 into 10 to the power minus 9 meters. Okay, so you have to understand how very, very what should I call it? What is the term that is used? I'm not trying to get it right now. So anyway, the power, it's a very, very powerful instrument that would be able to show you the separation between lines that are so closely spaced. Okay. Typically, the resolving power of a grating is given by lambda by delta lambda or lambda by d lambda, where d lambda is the separation of two wavelengths that the particular grating can just resolve. Okay, so if you are using a grating that can resolve two sodium lines of separation 6 angstroms but cannot separate two lines which are separated by less than a wavelength of 6 angstroms, then d lambda for that instrument is 6 angstroms. Okay. Now we will see something known as Rayleigh's criterion of resolution. What does the Lord Rayleigh was the first person who gave a criterion for this resolution, that what is the mathematical or optical condition under which two lines can be said to be resolved as two separate lines. Okay, what does it say? It says two neighboring lines will be just resolved when the center of one maximum falls on the first minimum of the adjacent line. Let's see what this means. First picture. See, these are the two lines. Okay, this is the typical spectrum intensity distribution of a particular line, and this is the intensity distribution of the other line. Okay, this is say for lambda, and the other one is for lambda plus delta lambda. You can see that the maximum of the second line appears before the minimum of the first line. See, this is the maximum of the second line. It comes before the minimum of the first line. And so according to Rayleigh's criteria, these lines are unresolved. See, they are so close together that when you draw an envelope, it shows one peak, one single peak instead of two separate peaks. All right. Now let's see the second condition. Again, this is one peak and this is the other peak. But now maximum of second line falls just on the minimum of the first line. See, maximum of second line, this is the maximum of second line and this is the minimum of the first line. They fall together, and this is called to be just resolved according to Rayleigh's criteria. And we look at a third picture where again we have to see here the envelope, the red curve is not a single one, but it shows a dip over here. So you do see two separate peaks. All right. And then here we have again two spectral lines, and here maximum of the second line appears after the minimum of the first line. Maximum of the second line appears after the minimum of the first line, and so these two lines are well resolved. Okay, so have you understood what we mean by resolution of two lines? When the two lines, the intensities of the two lines will be seen as two separate peaks, and the minimum condition for that is given by Rayleigh's criteria, that the maximum of one at least falls on the minimum of the other. If the maximum comes before the minimum of the other, in between, so they will not be seen as two separate lines. All right, this dip over here, it must be at least greater than 20% of the peak value for resolution. Here there is no dip. Even if there is a very small dip, it won't be able to be seen as two separate lines. The dip must be at least 20% or greater than that. See here the dip is pretty large, so you can see them as two separate values. Here the dip is just 20% of the peak value. So this is the condition for resolution. All right. Now the grating equation is d sine theta equal to m lambda. So if you take the same equation for the line at theta plus delta theta, which is the line for lambda plus delta lambda. So we write this as d sine theta plus delta theta equal to m lambda plus delta lambda. But this maximum of the line for lambda plus delta lambda, for Rayleigh's criteria to be satisfied, should be the first minimum of the line for lambda. All right. What do I mean? See, d sine theta is the position for maximum of lambda, and lambda by n is the first minimum for lambda plus delta lambda. Okay, no, this should be the other way around, sorry. D sine theta, yes, no, it's all right. This is the first minimum for lambda plus delta lambda. Remember the position of secondary minima, p by n lambda. So for p equal to 1, the position is obtained at lambda by n. So if you expand this, you get m lambda plus m delta lambda equal to d sine theta plus lambda by n. But we know that d sine theta equal to m lambda from the grating equation. So what remains is lambda by delta lambda equal to m into n. So this is the chromatic resolving power of a grating for a given order m. You can be given small, very, very small 1 mark, 2 mark problems from this portion, you know. Say you are given a grating and you have to resolve the sodium lines, separation for which is 6 angstroms. What is the minimum number of lines in the grating in order to resolve these lines for the first order? So you put m equal to 1, you put delta lambda equal to 6 angstroms, you put lambda as the mean wavelength of sodium light, and solving this you get the value of n. So at least that number of rulings must be present on the grating so that you can see the sodium lines separately. Alright, and this is very, very highly used to see separation in the laboratory, this resolving power method. And as you can see, higher the number of rulings in a grating, better is its resolving capacity. So the higher the value of n, higher is the resolving power of a given grating. Alright, so that more or less covers our discussion on grating. And finally we have to do a small discussion on the differences between grating spectrum and prism spectrum, because you have so long you know about a prism spectrum, and you produced spectrum in the laboratory using the prism only, but now you see that there is some other instrument that can also produce a spectrum, and therefore a comparative study is important. So this is how a grating spectrum is produced. White light, this is a diffraction grating, and central fringe white, but spectrum at the higher orders of principal maxima. On the other hand, you know the method of spectrum production in a prism. You know how the prism spectrum is produced. So these are the typical points of difference. In grating, you get not one but several spectra on either side of the principal maxima. So you call them the first order spectrum, the second order spectrum, and so on. Whereas in prism, there is only one single spectrum. Since there are several spectra of different orders in a grating, higher order spectra, there may be overlapping between two orders, okay, colors of two orders. This is not applicable for a prism spectrum. In the grating, the central is the brightest, whereas the intensity diminishes on either side because you know of the presence of the diffraction envelope. Once again, not applicable in the prism case. In a grating, red is the most deviated, whereas in prism, violet is the most deviated, simply because of the mechanism of spectrum production. This is dispersion, this is diffraction. So the deviation of violet is most in prism, deviation of red is most in grating, as you can see. Ghost lines and missing orders present, no such thing in prism. And angular dispersive power does not depend on the material of the grating. You see, it depends, it does not depend on the material of the grating, but angular dispersive power depends on the material of the prism. Okay. All right. So that brings us to an end of this discussion of multiple slit diffraction, grating, and a bit of resolving power. If there is any question that you might have now, you can ask me now or you can ask me later on. But that completes our discussion on Fraunhofer diffraction comprehensively. Okay. So we have not left anything out in the discussion of Fraunhofer diffraction. The only part left is Fresnel diffraction, which is a very short part of your syllabus. So I think I'll take the class again next Wednesday to discuss Fresnel's diffraction. Is it all right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And meanwhile,